Hi and welcome to Cooking for Baby. Well, we all like to have a little bit of a mix-up in our diet, not just the meat and two veg that maybe our grandparents had. We like to mix it up with some fish dishes, but also some vegetarian ones, and babies are not alone in that either. The dishes I'm going to show you now are all fantastic, delicious vegetarian dishes that are perfect not just for your little one, but also for the whole family. Okay, so the dish I'm going to show you is called squash and red lentil. It's perfect for babies once they're past the very first stage. So once you've introduced a variety of single variety purees, you're ready to move on to a little bit more texture. And lentils are a great way to bring a little bit more grainy texture in, which you can then gradually increase as your baby gets more confident with it. Let's grab a butternut squash. Any kind of squash or pumpkin is perfect for this recipe. I quite like the big red round curries as well as the butternut squash. And what you do is, as you would with any other recipe, cut it in half, scoop out the seeds, peel it, and then grate it. So you scoop out the seeds, take off the peel, and then grate it either with just a normal grater or put it through your food processor. So the ingredients we've got here is grated squash. This one's actually butternut squash, and there is 300 grams of squash here, and then 100 grams of red lentils. With all lentils, you should actually rinse them before you use them. So just use a fine grade metal sieve. Just rinse them under cold water. And you also just need to give them a once over, because occasionally, because the lentils themselves are so hard, you just need to see if there's any tiny little stones in them. I find that lentils are much better cooked in a pan rather than steamed. They take quite a long time just to get them soft enough when you steam them. Put them in a saucepan and cover them with boiling water, just enough to cover. Then you just bring them to the heat. Because lentils take a little bit longer to cook than the squash, just to give them about another 2 or 3 minutes as they just start to go slightly transparent and slightly soft before adding the butternut squash in. So these have been cooking for 3 minutes. The edges are starting to go clear, so I'm now going to add in the squash. Now this is still for a young baby that's less than a year, so there's no added salt in this recipe at all. There's enough natural salt in the lentils and in the squash for the baby. And babies really shouldn't have any additional salt added to food before they're 12 months. And that's because their kidneys just aren't developed enough to cope with the additional salt. It really does depend on the season whether the squash is quite dry or quite juicy. So you'll have to use your eye to work out whether you need to add a little bit more liquid, and this one certainly does. So what you want to do is just enough water to cover it. You put that on a very gentle simmer for 10 minutes until everything, including the lentils as well as the largest piece of squash, is soft enough to squeeze between your finger and your thumb. Okay, so it's now been cooking and I've tested it and the lentils are nice and soft. The reason you want to be able to swallow it in 2 swallows is that when you're at this stage, your baby's learning to deal with texture. So with the smooth purees, the single variety purees, the baby can swallow the purees in just one go. For a confident baby, you can serve this as it is. You may also want to give it a little bit of a blitz. And that's the great thing about homemade baby food, is you can make it as smooth or as textured as you like. So rather than use a little herb chopping attachment, we're going to use the standard normal blender that comes with a hand blender. And you just give it a couple of quick pulses. If you want to, you can keep it going till it's really smooth, but you just want to keep enough texture in there. And that's really all it needs. I'm just going to pop it into one of these little serving bowls so you can see what it looks like. This really has a lovely warm wintry smell. Of course, if you're making this up, you may not want to use just a tiny little bit of squash. You might want to make the whole squash up. It really makes a really lovely heartwarming soup for the whole family. And that's butternut squash with red lentils.